Welcome to RickRackRuby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we will be making this vintage Halloween girl clothespin ornament. She's fun and easy, so let's get started. To make the vintage Halloween girl clothespin doll, we'll start with the clothespin. I've already made her face. The eyes are wood burned, the mouth and nose are painted, and then the eyelashes and eyebrows are drawn with a marker, and the cheeks are blushed. The instructions for the RickRackRuby face are found in my Focus on Faces video. I'm going to use purple and black. You can use any colors you like. Burgundy is good, orange, brown, brown and black, whatever color you like. I have this trim, it's really pretty. I'm going to use this little purple flower. You could also use white or off-white. And I'm going to glue this on for her bodice, right here underneath her chin. Squeeze out a little bit of glue in the center, and I'll glue that right there. I think I'm going to add a little more glue around the edges to secure all the petals. That looks good. And now for her skirt, I have cut a piece of this silk fabric 3.5 tall and 7 inches wide. I'm going to fold up and press a 1/2 inch seam and then hem it with a little zigzag. Of course, you could always use a Halloween print. Now I have a black lace that I will line up like this. I will trim off the excess, and then I'm going to save that and then fold and seam up the back. Easy. There we go. Now I'll trim out this little extra and maybe trim off this corner. Turn this right side out. And then by hand, I will gather up the top edge. I'm using a doubled strand of black quilting thread to gather this up along the top raw edges. And then before I pull it tight, I'm going to put it around the clothespin. Just below the chest. I want a little, just her little tippy toes showing here at the bottom. And then I will wrap the seam is in the back, and then I'll wrap around this like a little belt. But don't worry, this is not going to show because we have a cloak that will hide the top raw edge. And then I will secure my thread in the back and tie it off. I'm going to add a little smudge of glue in the back right here, just to make sure that the skirt doesn't slip up and down. I'll just stick that on there. Now for her cape or her cloak, I've cut a 3.5 inch circle of black felt. And then I've cut it in half like this. So it's a half circle, a half of a 3.5 diameter circle. I used a compass and just drew it on paper and used it as a pattern. But you could also use a die cutter. The cloak is going to go like this and then sort of overlap in the front with the tips overlapping like this. She doesn't have any arms. I imagine her arms are inside her cloak. So right at the center top, the straight edge right here, I'm going to add a drop of glue. This is why I'm not worried about the back of her body being concealed either. It'll be covered by the cloak. Did I get that centered? Sometimes I'm talking and I'm not paying attention. And then down, not so much like this, that's too tight, but more down, down, so that you can still see the flower. And I am going to just use my glue gun for this. Down and center. And this one I'll be a little bit more careful so the glue doesn't show. And then down to the center. I can still see her little purple flower. And I think that looks pretty good. Right there, where the corners of the cloak overlap, I'm going to add a little embellishment. You can do a millinery flower or a piece of lace or just any little doodad, but I like a contrast. I also could use, you know, something from this, but I like the contrast of the off-white. Now for the hair, I'm using burgundy embroidery floss. But recently, I went to Joann Fabrics and they had this super cool variegated floss. It's 4522 and it's looks like sort of like browns and burgundies, and I think that would be really good for the hair on this project as well. But since I already had this burgundy color opened up, I figured I better use this. I will wrap my 4 fingers 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know why I count, you guys. I could count in my head. And then cut it off, and then the center of the bundle you're going to tie off. I'll use another strand. Just tie it off in the center. That looks about right. Nice and tight. And then these extra ends I'm going to trim. Then the center of the bow, the center of the hair, I will glue to the very top of her head. Those little ends might creep out and look like bangs, and that's kind of cute. I think I'll do that. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure if we're going to see them in the end, but that's the idea. I don't really need any hair in the back, only on the sides. So I'm going to apply some glue right here, and then I'm going to press these into the side of her head. That looks good. And that looks good. Her bangs look good so far. We'll see if they stay. Now for the hat. The hat starts with a 2-inch diameter circle. I cut it out of pink so you could see it. I cut this with a die cutter. And then a half of the circle is too big and a quarter is too small. So you want about 1/3 of the circle for the pattern. If you're using a protractor, you could do a 120-degree angle. But what I do is I just kind of fold it in half and then fold it into quarters and then kind of cut in between those 2 lines. Then cut out a piece of black felt with this pattern. Fold it in half and seam up with a little baby seam allowance the raw edges like that. My seam allowance is about 1/8 of an inch. And now I'm going to turn this right side out, which can be tricky. So I can use the point of the needle to kind of work that point out. Now I'm going to try it on where the seam is at the back. I don't want the hat to cover her face. I'm tilting the hat back so it actually covers that extra bit of the wood that's showing, and that so her face is very evident and obvious. I'm gonna pretty much fill this with hot glue. I'll show you, not really all the way, but it uses a lot of glue. And I'm pressing it to secure. That looks good. I'm using wool felt, which is a little bit thicker than acrylic felt. Now we're going to embellish her hat. I have a little scrap of millinery netting, but I have also used the leftover from the lace when we cut the lace. I found it easier to sew it. So on the side of her hat, I'm going to start my thread. And then I'll wrap this around the brim. One loop. And then I'll stitch around it to secure. See if this works. Good. All right, so I'm going to secure this, but I want to show it to you first. See how the millinery netting is, it's all the way around the hat. And it's secured right here on the side. I'm going to tie off this thread. I just know since everything is black on black on black on black, it might be hard to see. I'm not going to do anything else because I like the way that the millinery netting is just kind of floating around her hat. I really like the way that looks. Now I'm going to embellish this little bow with, well, I have options. I have this. I could use part of this, which I think is too big. I could use a button, which would be cute. I have this button too. But my favorite is this vintage mushroom, which I believe you can find new versions of these. But I got this from Tinsel Trading. And although I've tried very hard to get this to work, it's just a little bit too big and clunky. So I'm going to remove the stem. There's actually a little wire. There's a little wire in the stem, and just use the mushroom cap here. So I'm just going to use the mushroom cap and just glue it to that bow right here. That looks good. And finally, I'll sew a hanging loop through the very top, and I'm using a black and white baker's twine. There we go. Here are some other examples. This one's almost identical. This one has a black lace here instead of the purple. I thought the purple looked better. And I did use the top of the lace for her hair, for her hat. And this one, I think I went a little overboard and I added trim all the way around the cloak, which is cute. And then I put a big purple flower in her hair. Anyway, they're super fun. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.